Well, it's Thursday night, and I don't work Fridays anymore, so I got some time to kill in the shop. And that is the last part of my cases that I haven't cleaned yet from the new set that I had ordered off eBay that showed up. I got the rest of the motor going together over here. I put the other 3 rod and piston combos in tonight. So I got somewhat of a short block going, but I need to get that case cleaned up and done so I can get the trans and the rest of the bottom end stuff buttoned up. Then the last thing I'll have to worry about is cylinder head. And it also gets a lot of other parts cleaned up off my benches. But I figured, since I got to go through a fresh set of cases here, I'd just show you guys what I do for like oil mods. Everybody's always worried about oil mods on these things. And it's nothing really elaborate to make these things live. It's just making sure that the important parts get the most amount of oil they can get. And then obviously having clearances and stuff right. But given that's a constant variable, you just want to make sure that the oil can get where it needs to go and do it efficiently. So there's not a lot to do. Some of it's kind of more so just for peace of mind. But there's a couple things that I think do help with the oil flow in the motor. So I'll kind of show you how the oil kind of runs through the bottom part of these cases and what we're going to change. So first thing we'll talk about is we'll kind of start with where the oil pickup is and where the oil goes from the pickup to the pump, from the pump to the passages. And with these 1000 cases, everybody wants to run, they don't want to run an oil cooler. They want to run the oil cooler block offs. It'll kind of show you why that's a bad idea if you don't drill out, do the oil mod to that restrictor that's in there, or if you don't run an actual bypass hose. I don't like the hose. It's one more thing hanging on the outside of the motor. It's not necessary. I'll show you where to drill that piece out, and we'll go from there. Okay, bear with me. This is going to get awkward because I'm doing this kind of one-handed showing you here. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with where the oil pickup mounts down here. Now, if you look down in that galley where the oil is getting sucked through towards the pump, there's a little step down there. So I'll put the camera down here. You can see that step right there. Screwdriver's hitting it, and the oil has to get past that step to get down into this like little radius area where it's going to get sucked into the pump over on this left side here where the screwdriver is. So if we turn our cases here, I'll try not to get you all seasick. So the oil is getting sucked into the pump through this side here. Comes into the pump. Obviously the oil pump drive shaft is in the middle. Comes into the pump, it's compressed and forced out into this side here. Now if you look at the bottom, I'll leave the screwdriver sit there. Can you see there's a hole in there? That's where the oil is getting pushed into to start feeding the motor. But before it gets to any of the bearing journals or anything, it's going to come down. Try to get the best lighting I can for you here. It's going to come down this oil galley right here. Goes through this on the inside, obviously. Runs under this one. Those two aren't connected. Runs into that right there, that big hole coming into the filter. It also, this is where your bypass valve mounts. You can see the screwdriver up in that hole there. Boy, you can't really tell, can you? I'm trying, guys, I'm trying. Hold on. You're gonna get you sick for a second. Now do you see it? Screwdriver coming in there. So that's where the pressure relief valve mounts. So as the entire system gets up to pressure, that bypass valve would open, and then that dumps it back to the pan. So basically you just don't keep creating an infinite amount of pressure and hydrolocking the oil pump or whatever. But that's your pressure valve basically sets max pressure that the motor is going to run at, and which varies on oil thickness, but yeah, so that's where the pressure valve mounts. So anyways, comes from the pump now, down that long galley, into the oil filter, bypassing whatever excess pressure into the back right to the pan. Comes into the filter, out of the filter, goes right back down the center here. So what I'll do is in here, we're going to radius some of these hard edges out of there. That top corner there, we'll radius that out and smooth it. We'll kind of blend all that in so the oil can get into the filter easier. And obviously we can't change how it comes out of the filter because that'll be screwed on there. But the oil is now going to go from filter. Now it's going to start feeding the motor to the critical parts. Now it's going down this galley. Now it's coming through here. It's going to go into this. It's going to start feeding right through here. These ports here, you see, these are just plugs for machining where they're connecting stuff. So now we're feeding this galley across the bottom of the motor. Obviously now you can see where the oil cooler fittings would bolt on. That side and that side. And this is now why I say you can't just plug those and run oil cooler block-offs without drilling out the restrictor, which would be on this side. So if this was in the motor, this would be your left side of your motor. Put the flashlight up here now. So if you look in that hole, I got it drilled out already, but you can see I drilled it right to the first step. Kind of hard to tell actually, but normally there'd be an oil restrictor in that hole just about where the screwdriver's coming down. Try to show you. I don't know. This is really difficult to show you guys. So you can kind of see the screwdriver in there. That oil restrictor would be right about that area. So now if you can imagine oil coming from the pump and trying to fill this galley, there's a restrictor right over here, which basically makes the oil all have to go into the cooler, out of the cooler, which is in the front of the bike, around back to this side. It comes back in this side and now feeds down into this galley. And obviously that is now where you're going to start feeding your mains. So now, could you imagine having oil coming into this galley and having that restrictor in there and then both sides plugged? The oil at full pressure is trying to get from the filter into this galley, and it's trying to get through a little, like, I should have measured it before I drilled it. I'd say a 60 to 90 thou orifice. All your oil's trying to get through that to get to this side of that restrictor to where it can start feeding your main journals. And then also, this is what starts running oil up to the top of the motor. So it just dawned on me that these cases that were sitting right here the whole time that I bought, realized they were the wrong year, wrong size, so I didn't actually do any work to them. They have the factory oil restrictor in there yet. So I'm going to try to show you how big it actually is before you drill it. See the guy in there? That's what gets drilled out. Again, we're on the left side of the cases. All you got to do is drill that out as close as you can get to the size of this opening. I've done 5/16, I've done 3/8, whatever you can get in there with. But the factory hole is only about an 1/8 inch. So my guess from memory of like 90, 100 thou, 60 thou, whatever the hell I said, it's about an 1/8 inch. So that's what's got to go away if you want to block these off and not run an oil cooler. So we'll get back to now. Now you kind of understand how the oil is flowing through the motor. We'll talk about the mods. So like I said, we're going to radius that out of there, kind of blend that out. We're going to address, oh, I'm looking at the wrong side. We're going to address where the oil filter mounts and kind of smooth that radius out there. The oil restrictor is already drilled out of these cases. I did that right when I first got them. And after that, all I do is go through and I'll have to notch this webbing out, these 4 spots. I'll notch the webbing out because with the main studs And with the whole stud girdle that's in the bottom of the motor, those got to be notched to clear the bolts. Not a big deal. And then we'll go through and take all of these drain back holes areas, and we're going to blend them all in. We're taking radius the corners off. We'll come in here and we'll knock some of the flashing off the castings. Anything to help the oil drain back a little bit. We just want to take hard edges off of stuff. Just make them nice and clean. And that's really all there is to it. I don't do a whole bunch. It's just a couple basic things that are kind of important. But once you understand how the oil flows through the motor, then the mods that you do start to make a little more sense as to why you do them. So for now, enough babbling. Let's get to doing some aluminum grinding. So a couple things here. I went ahead and did the little clearance modification to these ribs to clear my my main studs and my girdle. One thing I didn't mention when I was explaining kind of the path of the oil, when this whole main galley gets pressurized here and starts feeding the mains, there's also a little galley right here. This is drilled out. That this is what feeds up to the top part of the middle, or to the middle cases, we'll say. Then there's this galley drilled. It's through this hole, drilled up here, and it feeds this oil restrictor. It's just like a basic, almost like a little carburetor jet, and it fills this galley here, and that's what puts oil to the transmission bearings. Something very simple design, just something I thought I'd mention if you're wondering, you know, what that stuff is. If you ever see your cases are apart and you're looking like, oh, I wonder what that is. That's all it is. That just feeds the transmission. Okay, mod 1 done. Look how much cleaner that looks in there now. No more funky step. It's just kind of smoothed out. Funnels in there nice and easy. One down. On to the next little mod. So there's the second little mod. So I just radius those top and bottom edges, smooth them into that hole. Now we will continue on with cleaning up all these drain back areas, just the top side. We're just going to radius hard edges around and take off any burrs. Got these pretty much where I want them now. Like I said, short of just kind of doing a few of the little, like, you know, porting tricks, drilling the restrictor, rest of it is mostly just kind of looking for imperfections in the casting. Taking burrs off, radius and hard edges, keeping ledges out of there that oil don't sit on. Nothing elaborate. You kind of got every case piece is sort of a little bit different than the previous one, as far as, you know, things, manufacturing discrepancies, we'll say. But this is pretty much where I want it. One thing I just want to clarify on, because I'm not sure if I explained it right. When I was talking about how, you know, this is where it starts to feed the mains, and then this is where it starts to feed the top end. Not entirely true. Feeds the top part of the cases, I should say. This oil from this here doesn't quite make it to the top end. This is going to go from this port here, and I'm going to show you on my old cases. I took them apart so I can show you, because those are already together. I started working before I started filming. What it does is those halves would be onto this half. So this would be sitting like this. Meets this hole here. That guy. There's O-rings that seal these up. And where that goes is out this hole here. And feeds this hole here, which in turn feeds that galley that normally would be where your oil squirters are, and also the galley for the counterbalance shaft. Now I can show you what I did to these cases, because they're apart and the other ones are together before I decided to film. that galley, I keep all the oil squirters for the piston skirts get plugged off. Normally there'd be a little squirter in there with a bolt holding it in and an O-ringed fitting with the squirter attached to it. They're all just drilled. Well, the 4 existing ones are already 6mm by 1. So I just drilled the remaining 4 where the nozzle, squirter nozzle would have been. Drill that out, tap it, 6 by 1. So those all get plugged. So instead of just taking and plugging that port so it doesn't feed any of that stuff, I still run that because the galley is here across the part of the motor. I run the feed for my oil, the oil feed for my turbo runs off of this, so I don't plug that off entirely. I have heard some people do plug that off, but I don't because of, that reason. The oil actually getting to the top of the motor runs through the crank, basically. And it's going to go through this orifice here, and it runs up. You can almost see how they're cast in here. You can follow this oil's journey, basically, just by looking at how it's ran through the motor. So from that main journal, runs up, you see where the galley is drilled here. Well, that is also intercepted right here. And so that's actually what will feed the bottom of the cylinder head, in turn feeds the cams. I don't really do any oil mods at the top of the motor. Some guys will tap that hole and run an oil restrictor in there. I don't do it. It's just not something I'm comfortable with. And I also haven't seen positive or negative, results from people doing it and not doing it. I prefer to leave it alone just because more oil to the top end, to an extent. You don't want all the oil sitting up in the top end. Valve springs need cooling. It comes from oil. So you do need to have oil in the top end. I don't want to really restrict that. It's already not running the cooling system, so oil on valve train, good. But that's basically the simple idiot's garage version of the oiling system on these motors and the very rudimentary, crude mods I do to basically make them live. Like I said, over the years, the only oil system problems or oil failures I have had were due to last season when I switched camshafts, and for simplicity description, the freeze plug out of the cam was missing. I never saw it when I put the cam back in the motor over winter. So I was chasing an oil pressure issue most of the season. Couldn't figure out where it was stemming from until one day I was inspecting parts and I just happened to turn the camshaft on end and looked in the end of it and there was a plug missing. Hence a huge oil pressure drop. So I think that's where I'm going to wrap this one up. I'm going to go about getting this all cleaned up, making sure I don't leave any debris in the motor. I still got to kind of acid bath them and, or I should say aluminum bright. It's a mild acid. Get them cleaned up, looking good. Pretty much think they're ready to go after that. I got to swap under the blue towels. There's the old third part of my cases with all the trans stuff in it. So I'll have to swap all that stuff over yet. But a lot of just little piddly detail work. I know people are going to watch this video. Somebody's going to chime in, you should have did this, or you didn't do that, or I've always done this, and you didn't do that. And cool. This is just kind of what I've been doing. And things I've learned over the years, trial and error. There's some things I don't do anymore because it made no difference. So things that maybe you're not seeing me do is already, I've disproven it myself. So I don't waste time on stuff I don't think matters. Wait, did I say that right? I don't waste time on things that don't really matter. Maybe that's right. Anyway, some things are just for peace of mind. Other things I know help. So you got to kind of make that decision for yourself. Other than that, the only oil system problems I've had with my motors over the years was last season when I had all the oiling problems. And it was because it was my oversight. I didn't see that plug was missing in the end of the camshaft. And it was cams I decided to switch to over winter. I just don't know why I never looked at the end and saw that plug was missing. So I would have oil pressure at startup and it would just fall off. And it wasn't until like the third time going through the motor after knocking bearings out of it and having issues that I just happened to look at the end of the camshaft, saw that plug was gone. Bam, there was my issue. So a lot of wasted time and parts on just something stupid that I overlooked, which happens because I'm a hack. So yeah, hopefully the next time you tune in here, we're doing some cylinder head stuff. But for now, I got a couple days of basically just cleaning parts and putting like the clutch and the trans back in and just little trinkets. Not worth, doing a video on that. But we'll get her moving, get cranking. Hopefully we got this thing running pretty soon. I think I got everything I need.